I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darrell Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darrell Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darrell Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darrell Lee makes Christmas better. This is The 5 of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. The series where I talk to notable people about 5 of their favourite things. The way it works is my guests always choose a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. The reason I devised this series is I wanted to create a slightly different way to gain a genuine insight into the real lives and thoughts of prominent people. Todd Sampson is, amongst other things, an adventurer, award-winning documentary maker, ex-ad agency CEO, co-creator of Earth Hour, television presenter of a number of Australia's most critically acclaimed and highest-rating shows, and a board director of both Qantas and Fairfax. When I first met Todd 17 years ago, he had just returned from climbing Everest solo. So, mate, I have to ask, for all of us underachievers out there, have you ever turned your mind to something that hasn't worked out?
Are you actually? I was really taken by your intro.
You were loving it. Your head was swelling.
Not the whole part, but the point of this show. And I didn't realize you were actually coming to me.
Yeah.
I've turned my mind to lots of things that I haven't been able to succeed at. I wanted to be a competitive runner. I couldn't do that. I didn't have the strength or mental fortitude to do that. In my shows, I've failed many times. I've attempted to do things that just didn't work out, and that's often the highlight for a lot of people, the things that I don't succeed at. On the wire walk and Redesign My Brain, I fell the first time, and everyone tried to call it off, and I ended up getting back on and giving it a go. So yeah, I've failed probably percentage-wise at more things than I've succeeded at.
So no, don't take this wrong.
Yes.
I am bloody thrilled because as a friend, I find you make me feel inspired and inferior in equal parts.
Yeah, but you know me, Nigel. You know me, so you know. This is one of the strange things that you've known me for 18 years. I met you. You are one of the most influential people in my life for many decisions I've made in my life. And it is funny that because of some of the shows, they depict me as this sort of alpha male, and which I'm not. You know, I'm more of an introvert, more of a solo person. I don't have a lot of friends. I don't go out to events. I don't do any of that stuff. But in the shows are part inspirational, and they're part of a journey, a real journey, to see someone try something that they don't think they could do.
Fascinating. You, because of your profile, you do hundreds of interviews. I mean, you've come from doing 2 this morning. We want to make 5 of My Life slightly different. So I'd be interested in hearing how the process of making your choices made you feel. Joyous, sad, grateful, nostalgic, irritated, or none of the above.
Yeah, well, the first thing is I was surprised by effort, because most interviews are about your show, or I tend not to do anything in the public unless it's linked to something that I'm promoting. I think people see enough of me and hear enough of me, so I'm not going around on the publicity trail for the sake of publicity. It normally has an end goal, which is a launch of a show. But in this case, that's not what we're doing. So when you sent I loved the concept, but I didn't realize it would take so much effort. And so you actually have to think about it. So I chose to not overthink it.
Right.
I opened up my notes on my phone And I wrote very quickly what exactly came top of mind. Some could say subconsciously, I chose subconsciously. And I just put him down and I did the overnight test. And in the overnight test, the only thing I changed was the movie.
The one that you told me that you've chosen was Out of Africa, the 1985 Streep and Redford film. Is that still your choice?
That's still my choice.
It's not a happy story.
No, it's not a happy story. But I was 15 years old when I saw that. And I think inside I'm a true romantic, or someone who loves love stories. I've always loved love stories. My wife makes fun of me because she'd rather kill herself than go to a love story. But I take my kids. And I saw that when I was 15, and I fell in love with the character, his character, but more importantly, I fell in love with Africa. And that would change my life forever. Because I then, eventually in my life, my winding journey took me to Africa. When Nelson Mandela got into power in 1995, I packed up and moved to Cape Town. I had always...
This is from Canada?
From Canada. And you know that saying, when you get the dust of Africa in your shoes, you can never get it out? I have and had the dust of Africa in my shoes. And I've been there... I lived there for 6 years. During that revolution of a change of power from a white oppressive government to the current government that it has, I did part university there. I did an MBA there at one of their best universities, which was an excellent school. And it was momentous time. And that movie, and even the song in that movie, right? So that the lead song, I learned how to play on the piano. I don't play the piano, but I learned that one song because it's so much feeling for me. Those hills and the landscape and all of it meant something.
Wow. And do you rewatch the film? Or?
I have, yeah. I've been one of my missions, and I say this knowing that not everyone can afford to go to Africa, clearly. And but if you can, and you choose not to, that is an unbelievable oversight,
right? Because
it's where we've come from. And so I make it such a mission. I go back with my kids. My kids have been to Africa already. They've been to Africa 4 times. They've been where this movie was filmed, not because of that, but because we were adventuring and it was in that area. So I wanted to go see it. But I see it as if there was a spiritual home, pardon the phrase, that is definitely my spiritual home. And I want it to be part of my kids' lives.
Wow. And the character you identify with is the Redford one, not the Streep one.
Yeah, the Redford one.
So the Streep story, as in Blixen,
yes.
From the book, that's a devastatingly sad story. And when I was looking through your choices and researching them, she had to deal with enormous challenges and change in her life externally. And your book choice is about how all of us can better deal with challenges in our life. You chose Change Your Thinking by Sarah Edelman. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I guess the premise of most of the shows I've made and Body Hack specifically is about human potential on some level, sometimes overt, sometimes less overt. And I believe I work to the 30% rule, which is that we can never bring ourselves physically to failure. Failure's in your mind. And athletes know this. And so they call it the 30%. So when you hit the wall, you think you're done, you're finished, you've hit the wall, you still got 30% to go. Because the thing that limits you, the self-limiting factor in our lives is our mind. Our mind tells us it's time to stop. If you look at recently the marathon running, where they tried to get an under 2 hour record. No one's ever done it on the planet.
It's a 2:09, I think.
Yeah.
The record,
So they wanted to get under 2. So flat track, best conditions, best runners, African runners on the planet, fully trained, focused on creating history.
Yeah.
They run all out. They get just over 2 hours. They can't break it. But when he finishes, he does a little jog, like to cool down.
Yeah.
He did a little jog to cool down.
Yeah.
How do you do that? If I put a lion on that track, he would sprint at unbelievable speed. Because even him, a professional athlete running at full-on capacity, fully trained, cannot bring himself to that level. So I believe the limiting factor is the mind.
Right.
And self-awareness and tools and techniques can help you with that, can help you not necessarily go 30, but maybe 10% further in your life or in your physical activities. And after all the work I've done on the brain over 6 years in 3 continents, I've concluded, my own conclusion is that cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the best tools to do that. And Sarah wrote a book dedicated to that, which is accessible to everyone.
And have you always been a self-improver? Or is it something you came to in your 30s or your 40s? Or did you, when you left Canada to go to Africa, think, right, I'm going to, study to be the best? And
more insecure overachieving. More that. Not someone who thinks, I never start from the premise of I can do it. I start, even with Everest, I don't start from the premise of I can do it. I start from the premise I think I can do it.
Yeah. And
it's more out of a combination of an adventurous spirit and an insecure kind of personality. That combination is what's driven me. So no, it's always been self-medicating. Right. It's not been self-improvement in many ways.
Yeah, I remember something you said to me, 16 or so years ago, where you go, the trouble with climbing Everest, Nigel, is you've got to come back down. Mm. And if you are, if you achieve certain peaks, it doesn't matter. It could be commercial success or it could be climbing the world's highest mountain, wherever else. I see on your website, beautiful, wonderful, joyous picture of you standing on top of Everest. I've still got the jacket you gave me. My kids wear it to water polo. But you've got to come down.
Yes.
You're not in that moment. That's you on top of the world's highest mountain, having climbed it alone. Bloody hell. But then Naomi might say, could you take the recycling out, mate?
And that is, and we were working together around that time, and it is that. I mean, Everest is a symbol of achievement for many people, but for mountaineers, it's kind of just an exercise in resilience. It's not a highly skilled climb. It doesn't require a huge amount of mountaineering skill. But the thing with all climbs is, when I remember that day when I got to the summit of Everest, it was the 23rd of May, 2001, and I remember I'd lost so much weight, 16 kilos or 17 kilos, whatever it was. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was completely destroyed.
Yeah,
and I got up there and I remember I stood there, I was alone for that moment, and I just started crying. And I started crying and I was saying to myself, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I remember I had this really weird moment where I thought, who am I thanking?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a religious person, so who am I thanking?
Sure.
Is it just thankfulness? And then that lasts for about 30 seconds. And then you have to get down. Most people die on the way down, so that it's down. And then I remember I literally got back and I was selling toilet paper in an advertising agency.
And the thing I always find sort of surprising when on the very rare occasions I've achieved anything notable is you walk down the street and people aren't throwing their hats in the air going, hurrah, it's him. No one cares. You think people think about you, but they don't. I mean,
Yeah, but however, I would say that climbing something like Everest, because it means so much to other people, it is a change point in your life. Because when people know that of you, they will pass judgment, because it's like a massive tattoo that you now have on your body. That if you tell someone, like in America, if you tell someone I've climbed Mount Everest, they immediately go, ooh. First of all, if you tell a woman, most of them look at you and go, idiot. But if you tell someone in America, they'll be like, oh, when did you do it? How did you do it? And normally this kind of take you down a notch thing, they'll ask, did you do it with oxygen? As if that's less, park that. But in Australia, it's interesting, because if you told someone you climbed Everest, their immediately response to you is dickhead.
No, why is that?
Tall poppy. So,
okay, right.
People don't talk about themselves, and that's good. That's what I love about it. It's egalitarian.
Sure. Okay.
They don't, they might be interested, but if you at all are boastful over an achievement, no matter how grand that achievement may be in their eyes, they're just going to take you down to level ground.
The book that you lent me, brilliant, either Into Thin Air or something. There was some idiotic American socialite who did it like in a wheelchair or got carried up by a PA or something. And it's sort of, I'm sure she's lovely, but I hated her for demeaning the real achievement.
Well, it was funny because when I was on Everest, it was a brilliant moment. Eric, the blind climber, did it. He climbed it, right? And he was amazing. Although he slowed the mountain unbelievably, because he had 30 Sherpas, and every time he moved, the mountain shut down. So you kind of climbed around Eric. So I had summited before him, and then when I got down, I was on the listening to the radio while they were talking about him getting up, and he had his base camp support, and he was going to the summit. And when he got to the summit, it was one of the moments you wish you could, wind back. Yeah. And the base camp guy said, "I've made it, I've done it." And the base camp guy says, "How does it look?" And it was like you could just hear all the clicks of all the radios all around base camp just letting go. You know, like ching, 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 ching. And everyone's thinking, oh, did he just ask that? And Eric joked about it after he said it. It was quite funny, but just to clarify around climbing Everest alone, no one climbs Everest alone. If you climb during the season, then you climb with other people. In fact, at one stage I climbed with Pemba Dorje Sherpa, who saved my life on Everest on one of my attempts, the first attempt on that trip.
Mate, you said that he saved your life. What happened?
So I was attempting to go to 8,000 meters. So you have to stage from 8,000 meters, which is Camp 4 on Everest.
To do acclimatise to the altitude?
It's quick. It's no acclimatizing at 8,000. You're dying the whole time. So
in and out.
There's in and out, up, down. But you have to get there, and you have to spend a little bit of time there. So I was climbing across the Lhotse face, which is you need to get across to get to the Camp 4. And everyone was climbing the opposite way. All the Sherpas were going the other way. And I was like, oh, this is potentially not good, and lost in translation. So I get on to Camp 4, and it's a full raging storm, blizzard, just white out. I'm struggling to get a tent up and try, because I knew I'd have to stay overnight, which is a bad thing at 8,000 meters. I also knew I'd have to go back down, that I wouldn't be able to go for an attempt because of the storm. So I'm trying to get things out, and I see this red and blue jacket in the white of the storm. And it's a Sherpa. And he's stumbling, and he's got like 60 kilos on his back carrying Klein's gear. And he comes up to me, and we sort of talk bad language and together. And we just try to set a tent up. And we both get inside, and we didn't know if we'd make it through the night, because a lot of people can survive 2 nights at 8,000. And we get inside the tent, and he won't put oxygen on, because the Sherpas do not want to put oxygen on, because if they use it once, then they're dependent on it, and their body starts to adjust to the oxygen. I was like, there's no possible way we'd make it through the night without oxygen. He would definitely either lose his fingers, toes, or be dead. So I said, I'll put it on. I'll just put on a little. I put it on about 3. It was meant to be 1. I put on him. We get in spoons together because of the cold. We had one sleeping bag between us. And then I woke up choking because the mask, I'd run out of air, and the mask had frozen onto my face. And then I went to undo the tent, only to realize that we had been covered. Buried overnight. But luckily, we had oxygen on, and we were buried in a dome. Right. So it didn't quite completely engulf us or crush down on us. It kind of blew that side and then blew up on the other side. So the Sherpas don't like being buried, and they didn't grow up like I did in Canada, going into like building igloos and stuff. They didn't do that. So he started freaking out. We radioed down, and they asked me to leave him. I was like, I'm not going to leave him. And we ended up staying more there, and then he just freaked out and said, we're going. He said, we go. I left everything, all my gear there, and he led me.
Up or down?
Down,
right.
He led me through the storm. I could barely see him in front of me. I just saw the red, and I would never have been able to find the route. No chance, right? Because he knew it, So I followed him, and we got down. I climbed all the way down to base camp. I stayed for 5 days there, and then I climbed all the way back up to the summit. That was the journey. It would not have happened without Pemba Dorje Sherpa.
Was your stuff still there?
Yeah. The only thing I recovered from that was my recordings, because I recorded the whole trip on tape.
Wow.
No video, no camera, just voice recordings.
So
which, by the way, was translated at the company that you ran and I was working for. It was translated by the receptionist there during off hours, and I would walk by, and she was like bawling her eyes out.
Right.
And I was like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I said, I'm at that point where this happened.
This is The 5 of My Life. More with Todd Sampson after the break. This is The 5 of My Life with Nigel Marsh. So we've been talking about challenges, whether it's Karen Blixen, in Africa, or, changing your mind with cognitive behavioural therapy. Sometimes great challenges create great creativity and great art. And your choice of song, which I almost wish you hadn't chosen, because I hadn't heard it before, and I've listened to it twice, and I refuse to listen to it again because it moved me to tears both times, is Through the Dark by the Hilltop Hoods. And the story behind that song and the lyrics just floored me. So do you want to tell us why you chose that song?
So I'd been a kind of loose fan of Hilltop Hoods. I liked the music. I wasn't obsessed with them. And my crew, I filmed with the same crew everywhere in the world. And Maybe I shouldn't say his name, but my cameraman, who's been my cameraman everywhere in the world.
For every different series?
Every show he's done. He shot with me. Yeah, he's amazing. He's an amazing person. Tough, big, strong, 6'5" Australian guy. And his son got leukemia while we were filming. Was diagnosed with leukemia.
Wow. So that song would really...
Yeah, so it was... So then I knew about that, and then we were just about to film The Wire Walk.
Right.
Which I did in Redesign My Brain, right? So we were staying at a house. We'd filmed other things. We were staying at a house together, the crew, all of us together in one big room. And they're all musicians. They all play instruments and stuff.
Your cameraman's musician?
All of them.
Yeah, right.
The director sings, the bass, everyone plays music. And we were just sitting around kind of de-stressing. And Toby said, I've got a song I'd like you guys to hear. And he put that song on and he started bawling.
Well, yeah.
He just started bawling. And we were all just men sitting there silent, listening to the words. And then I started crying, and then Jeff started crying, and then that song had become an incredibly important song for me. So the Hilltop Hoods, MC Pressure, who is the writer of this, he wrote this song while his son was in the hospital being treated with chemo. And he wrote this song in many ways as an apology or as a record or to the journey of his son and why him and why he has to go through this. And he then didn't want to publish it. And they forced him to publish it. They said, please. He didn't want to sing it. They made him sing it. And it's one of my favorite songs. And I believe that, and I remember once a performance artist, an athlete told me that when I was training for Everest, they said one of the best things you can do is find songs that are emotionally strong for you if you want to be motivated. Yeah. And so that song is an emotionally strong song for me. And when I want to be motivated, even though I cry every time, I can turn that song on.
And I think, I hope this is true from my research, that is the son is in remission and health
in remission. Yeah,
healthy now. It's not a particularly attractive trait that I have, but I project onto my kids, which is off you go. It's got nothing to do with you, Nigel. But I just think, just like if I see an unfortunate homeless person or something, having kids means, well, for me, means you can't not empathise because you go, well, that could be Harry or that could be Grace. So I'm in tears listening to that bloody song, thinking, well, that could be me talking to one of my kids. And yeah.
And also, it's probably the only song or one of very few on the planet that exists that's about cancer. That's a pop song. There's very, very few that have been written like that. And I just warn anyone listening that it is one of the most beautiful songs you'll listen to, but it is heart-wrenching. But that's not a reason not to listen to it.
And I tell you, in terms of, I've spoken about this before about quality listening, is if I wasn't listening to that because you had chosen it and I'm researching this show, it's entirely possible, losing my hearing because I'm 54, but entirely possible that I wouldn't have got, you can just dismiss it as a rap song or whatever it is, just like my kids listen to duff, 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 trance music or whatever. And you go, just sort of, for me, it was an object lesson on paying proper attention. Yeah. So I listened to the song and then read the lyrics and then thought, oh, holy moly. So then listened to it again and got upset. But you can, if you skim the world, all these beautiful things sort of pass you by.
I go through phases with music. I love music. And I go through phases where I obsess about songs. Like I'll play it every day. I'll play it every day, maybe 4 times a day. I'll play it every time I get in my car. And that lasted for a long time, that song. And I only recently, I also like, because, music, however you listen to music, but in my case on my iPhone, it's the story of your life. The songs you choose to download are a story of your life. So one cool thing to do is just random all songs. Yes. And just see what happens.
Yeah.
So literally, when you spoke to me, I was flying to do this. I was flying to Brisbane for some work I was doing, and I hit shuffle, and bam, it came up.
Wow.
And I went, well, there's the answer to that. Because, I love Nick Cave, and he's been a big part of my life, and I love Ben Harper, and he's been a big...
Did you used to listen to Jack Johnson?
I don't.
No, it's interesting.
He fell off a bit for me because of the similarity of the music over a period of time, but I don't know, like... Nick Cave is, over the last probably 5, maybe 8 years, has been the one I've dug into his music the most. Something about him. And now with the loss of his son, maybe there's a theme going on here.
Yeah.
His latest album with the loss of his son was devastating. I'm a massive Nick Cave fan.
So we keep coming back to the theme of challenges, and I can't think of a more challenging place that you have chosen. You chose Mosul in Iraq, and it's not just a challenging place, but a challenging time. Tell us about that, mate.
So in Body Hack 2, I wanted to study, the premise is again to study the human body under the extremes, and see how we can and what we can learn from these people that live at the extremes. Well, there is no more horrific place for the body and mind than war. We then got invited. Literally, we were putting kind of feelers out with different militaries because I had done the French Foreign Legion the year before, and the Iraqi snipers came back and said, well, we'd love to host you. Now, they have their own agenda of their own story, but that was not the story I was going to tell. I was going to tell my own journey with them. And we packed up and got a specialized crew for this, and we flew to Mosul and embedded with the snipers. But it is what didn't make the film. The thing that people didn't see that hit me the most. So on the way there, we stopped in. Mosul's destroyed. It was, considered the kind of Paris of the Middle East at one stage. It was a stunning, beautiful place. It's leveled. Yeah. It is. You think you're on some kind of bizarre war movie, Steven Spielberg set. The buildings are all down. All the vehicles are crunched. It's just leveled. So more than 500,000 people have been displaced just in the area we were in alone. And so I went to the displacement camp. And when I got there, this young woman said she wanted to see me. I was nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I said, let's film it. Asked permission. She said, fine, I would like you to film it. So I sat with her, just like you and I are, kind of opposite, this close, outside with kids running around in the displacement camp. And she was talking to me about ISIS, and I could tell she was really distraught. I could see it in her eyes, the darkness. And I said, well, where are your family? And then she says to me that her mother was stoned to death in front of her by ISIS, and her father was decapitated in front of her. And her sisters, the only living relatives, were taken away and put in different places around the country. They'd never been able to find each other since then. And I remember she was... I wanted to hug her, but I felt culturally sensitive to hugging her. And when I stood up, she came to me and she hugged me. And I remember that moment, and I thought, I don't want to put it in the film because it feels exploitative to me. But it was one of the most impactful moments I had in Iraq, in Mosul.
Will you go back?
I would love to go back. You know what? I'd love to take my kids. I'd love to take my kids to Mosul. The thing that I would say about Iraq and Iraqi people is I am embarrassed to say that the majority of what I knew about Iraq was from media. So most of my learning, I didn't study it at uni, so it was from media. And that's not what I experienced. Some of the most lovely, kind, hospitable, giving people, even these military men, kind, hospitable, giving people. And it was... I try to get my kids as best possible because I think travel is education. And if you can afford to do it, then it's a good education for them. And I'd love to bring my kids there.
A, do you know what it's like there now? And B, do you have hope for its future?
I have hope, but I do know what it's like there now. The soldiers still contact me. But ISIS is a concept. It's not a unit. And that concept is not going away. And I think that we will be fighting concepts, and we are, Me Too is fighting another concept, but we are fighting concepts all the time, and they're not something you can get your hands around, and it never ends. You can't kill it. And I think that they will live. One of our soldiers was shot in the head, and I remember, I was there, and I remember the hatred, against this concept and the unbelievable desire to fight it. That doesn't go away when someone puts a white flag up and says, our army's now too small to fight you, so we quit for now.
Yeah. Gosh. Now, your possession is the autobiography of Edmund Hillary. And it's quite a nice sort of closing of the loop, because I can't think of anyone who embodies some of the traits that are clearly close to your heart more beautifully. I mean, his life, researching him for this conversation, I think of him as the bloke that climbed Everest, and you go, well, that's one of the things that he did. And your possession that you're going to talk to us about is it View from the Summit or another one you did, the autobiography?
It's Ed Hillary. It's another autobiography.
Another one. But it's a signed copy.
Yeah.
So please tell us about the book, but also the story of how you got a signed copy.
Yeah, so I'd always been a fan. When I was younger, I was a fan of him because he had climbed Mount Everest. And as a kid, I was always like a little mini adventurer. I used to, when I was young, I'd put my backpack on and go off into the woods or into the snow or whatever it would be. So I admired adventurers that traveled the world. And I always wished I could be an adventurer, like a Christopher Columbus and explore places that haven't been seen before, or an Ed Hillary who went on one of the toughest, hardest journeys to go somewhere where no one else has been before. So I'd always admired him. And when I was young, it was because he was a mountaineer. But as I got older, I admired him because he was a beekeeper, because it didn't change him. It didn't change who he was. He was one of the most famous people on the planet, but he was a beekeeper. He was a down-to-earth, lovely, straight-talking, big, strong Kiwi. That's what he was. And I love that about him. He never became a celebrity. He never became any of that. And then one day, we were working together, and I was going to New Zealand for work. I was doing a job with the Australian Tourism Commission, and I arrived in Auckland. It was 2 weeks before my attempt to climb Mount Everest, right? So 2 weeks out. And I fly into Auckland, and I remember I was speaking to the cab driver about mountaineering, and he was telling me that his son was a mountaineer and all that stuff, and I was into the conversation with him, and he mentioned Edmund Hillary, and he said, Edmund Hillary lives in Auckland. Now, I knew he was a Kiwi. I'm not stalking him. I didn't know exactly where he lived. So when I got out of the cab, I was staying at the Hilton Hotel. I got out of the cab and I thought, I wonder if Edmund Hillary is in the phone book. So I go upstairs, excited, thinking maybe he is. I go upstairs and I open up the white pages. And sure enough, in bold, Sir Edmund Hillary.
Brilliant. So 22 Acacia Avenue.
So what do? I nervously phone him.
Yeah.
So his wife June answers the phone, and I said, "Look, my name is Todd Sampson. I'm about to go climb Mount Everest in 2 weeks. I was wondering if I could have a word with Sir Ed." And then over a muzzled phone, right? I could hear her going, Ed, there's a climber on the phone, wants to have a word with you. He's got no idea who I am. I'm not on television. I haven't done anything on television at this stage. I'm a complete stranger. So he gets on the phone, he introduces himself, we talk, might be 2 or 3 minutes, then he says, if you'd like to pop around for tea, I'll be here for the next 3 hours. So
you jump in the cab.
So I call the Australian Tourism Bureau, who I'm there to meet. That's the whole purpose of the trip. And I said, look, I've just been invited for tea with Sir Edmund Hillary. Do you mind if I'm a bit late? And they were like, never mind us, just go see him.
Yeah.
So I dash downstairs with the address. I give it to the cab driver. And the cab driver says, do you know who lives there? And I said, yeah. He goes, that's Edmund Hillary's house. I said, yes. And he said, can I wait out in front? I was like, no, mate. There's enough stalking going on here. So I get in the house. June answers the door. I'm nervous. She puts a big smile on her face, hand on my shoulder, and she says, Ed's in the kitchen. And I go into the kitchen, and I don't know how else to describe it. You know how sometimes you meet people that you love, and it's a disaster? I walk into the kitchen, and it was everything and more that I'd ever want from someone who was a hero to me.
Right.
We sat down across from each other, more beside than across, because the table was shaped in a round shape. And June puts biscuits on the table, cracks open some milk, pats me on the back, and says, enjoy yourself, and walks away. Yeah. And I sit there just talking completely normally, without any pretense, without any celebrity, without anything. Yeah. Just talking about him, his life, Tenzing, and the summit. And it's so Kiwi, isn't it? It's so Kiwi that one of the most famous people on the planet would be in the white pages.
Yeah. Oh, it's gorgeous. And it's 10 years since he passed, isn't it? I think he passed in 2008. Yeah.
And that's one of my life regrets. So when I came down, my own insecurity, I just thought I'd interrupted him enough, you know? And I thought that I had already crossed the line.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it again. And I didn't send him a photo from the summit. And then he died. And then I wrote this story that I'm telling you in the Sydney Morning Herald, and his family reached out to me to say thank you.
Is June still with us? Or
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. Now, so that leads me on to my trick 6 question is, Alex, my producer, has a unrivaled Rolodex. And as long as they're not fictional or dead, we can get anybody on this show. So to wrap up, I'm going to ask you, who would you like to hear on 5 of My Life next?
I've got 2 that I wouldn't mind hearing from. Craig McLaughlin.
Right.
Or Don Burke.
Wow.
Because I think you would be an interesting person to sit across from two people that probably don't want to talk, and to people that we should hear from.
Consider it done. Todd Sampson, it's been an honour and a real privilege, mate, to hear your 5 of my life. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
The 5 of my life was presented by me, Nigel Marsh. Producer, Alex Mitchell. Sound production and theme music by Darcy Thompson and Matt Nicholish.